So Cameron is the, you can help fill in my gaps of understanding.
Sure.
First of all, he's the national record holder for 10,000 meters, 27:07. That works out to be a ridiculously fast pace of what, about 65?
Yeah, about 65.
So 65 seconds. So think about that. That is running, 65 seconds is 4:04. That's running, repeat 4:04, 1500s over and over and over again. Cam, you two-time NCAA champion?
Correct.
Not only that, you got the Bowerman Award, which is like the NCAA best track and field athlete of the year. So they don't just give those out willy-nilly. That means that you beat up on all the other events and they esteem you as being...
Maybe not all the other events.
All right,
That's maybe a little excessive, right?
Well, it means that you...
No,
come on, I'm pumping you up, man.
The long jump,
Yeah, so that means that you were an athlete that they esteemed to be the highest performer that year, above the long jump and hammer.
Yes.
You're right, not all the events because they don't have NCAA race walk. We just have Evan Devlin done for, right? So, anyways, Olympic athlete and just overall great guy. World Championship finalist. Yeah. So let's welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I had a great time being here last year, and I'm just excited to be here again and seeing some familiar faces and hopefully some new ones. And hopefully we can have a good time and have a good workout. Hopefully the weather isn't too bad or gets any worse, I guess I should say. Yeah, let's have fun today.
Yeah. So, Cam, you're not running today. You're coming off some injuries.
Yeah, I had surgery about 10 weeks ago on my foot and ankle, and I've been on crutches for about 6 weeks after that, and been in an air cast for about 8 weeks of it. And so I've only been walking for about 2.5 weeks, and so I don't think I'm in any position to run right now. But I'll be back, and if this was a month later, I would be happy to do this with you guys. But I'll also be on a bike today, so I will still be out there.
So, is this the first big injury that you've had?
I would say, yeah, this is the first time I've needed surgery for anything running related. And so, yeah, this is sort of the biggest thing by far. I had a lot of stuff going on my foot and ankle. I had 2 stress fractures, a torn tendon, like a bone spur, and a couple bone chips needed to be taken out. And so there's a lot of stuff going on there.
Yeah.
And I got a screw now on my foot, but it's not like attaching any bones together, so it's just stabilizing one of the bones. So it doesn't seem like it'll be a problem for the future of my running career. Yeah.
Problem in airport metal detectors maybe, but not running.
Yeah.
So what did you learn through going through this? I mean, this is your first surgery. Obviously, it was an Olympic year. There's a lot of stuff. What are the learnings that you pulled from that?
Well, I think anybody would sort of feel disappointment at first, missing the Olympics. I mean, you're training for 4 years, and that's kind of your singular focus for those 4 years. And I mean, you're training for a long time before that even as well. I mean, it's kind of like a lifelong goal. So I mean, obviously I was pretty devastated at that, in that regard. However, from my understanding, if I continued to run on this foot, I may have had to have part of the bone lost, it died on me. And so it's kind of everything that happens, I think, happens for the best kind of thing. That's how I feel about it. So disappointing, but my career is not over, and I think that's kind of how anyone should look at it. Just because something derails your dreams, I mean, it's a long life, and you have a lot of attempts at it. So,
so kids here are experiencing injuries or have any kind of words of encouragement you'd give them or advice?
Well, I guess if you're having something as serious as I had, I would say patience is key, because it's something that could potentially have detriment down the road for you if you really rush back to from an injury. And I mean, and that really does go for anything. I mean, I had an injury in my other foot growing up, a stress fracture then, and I came back too quick from it, and I still get pain in that foot when I ran lots. And I'm fortunate that it hasn't affected me, but I very well could have more difficulty with it than I have.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's just, you just got to be very, very careful. You're going to be a lot better off being healthy than rushing back to training a little bit sooner in the long run.
So let's talk about your training a little bit. I mean, when you're healthy and things are going well, describe for us kind of a typical training week. Well, let's look at two typical training weeks. Let's say one typical training week when you're in your base phase, you're building up, no races in sight, you're working out and that kind of deal.
Okay. I don't know if the Oregon Project's unique in this sense, but I don't necessarily feel like there's, at least as far as mileage goes, there's kind of a base phase, at least for me. I feel like after seasons end, typically you begin to build back up that mileage, and when you get to a certain point, or whatever that mileage may be, for me it's about 140 miles. I kind of just try and maintain that through the season. Really, the big changing factor is the workouts. And typically the schedule for workouts is the same. It's Tuesday, Friday, and then a long run Sunday. And that doesn't really change besides having races, kind of mix up that schedule a little bit. But on an ideal week, that's kind of how it works. And those workouts they start from a very easy place and they build throughout the entire season until ideally you're hitting your best workouts by the end of that section of the year. And we typically have our season's sort of split into two peaks. One right around the the beginning of March, kind of like indoor season for us, and then once again in August, September, building up to that time as well. And so, it's nothing. It's not rocket science or anything, but that's just how it works for us. And there's a lot of ways to do it, and that's how it works for the Oregon Project.
So, what kind of workouts would you do at, say, the beginning? That kind of you're just coming back from your break. What kind of workouts would those be compared to something that 2 weeks out from your major competition?
When we start out, the workouts themselves, you actually see a lot of the same workouts throughout the season,
yeah.
And just the speed itself is increased. There's typically the workouts will start out with sort of a lower volume and just less intensity in general, and both of those things continue to increase throughout the season. Typically, you hit the volume a lot sooner than the higher intensity. But do you just want an example?
Just an example or two. Yeah.
Okay. So our tempos. I'll just use this kind of the easiest example I can think of. We'll start out maybe doing 4 or 5 miles tempo, and I would say probably about 5 minutes to 5:10 per mile pace, which I guess for kilometers, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, 306.
Okay, 306. All right. I'm in the States. Sorry, guys. And by the end of the season, we have that down to, I'd say, 4:30 and as high as 7 or 8 miles. And typically we hit that volume pretty early within that training cycle, so we can get up to that mileage, that length of tempo pretty early.
Kilometer translation, so that would be in and around, say, 250s. So dropping from 306 at the early season, maybe 310, down to 250s.
Okay.
I feel like it's almost like a French translator. What he said was. Yeah. And so that would be a tempo run. What about like a track session? Do you guys get on the track fairly early or throughout the year? Or
we try and stay on the grass as much as possible, and especially early on. I would say even throughout the whole season, at least half the workout is on the grass, and more so at the beginning of the season. And then we move over to the track. And I mean, no one within our group really does cross country, and so if that was the case, I'm sure we would not be getting onto the track at all. But as it is, it's kind of the team trains specifically for track, and so we kind of have to be on it most of the year. At least that's how we feel.
So do you have like a set grass track? Or
yeah. We have a couple areas on campus, and I mean, we kind of just make the loop whatever we have.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, because we have a field that's about 3 loops per mile, and then we also have a turf field that's about 300 meters around.
Yeah.
And so we have 500 meter, a little over 500 meter loops, and around 300 meter loops. And it's just kind of whatever you have is what we do. It doesn't really matter where we go. We always try and measure that out and make sure we get that soft surface. Yeah.
So now you're doing 140 miles a week when you build up, kind of, and you're holding that.
Yeah.
Now, is that all running, or is that including like cross-training stuff?
That's including a little bit of either running on underwater treadmill. Once again, things that aren't very practical for most people, but running on underwater treadmill and then using the Alter G machine. We try and do maybe about 10 or 15%, of our mileage on there.
Okay.
And so,
sorry, is that 10 or 15% on the Alter G, or with both of those combined?
it is dependent for each athlete. I mean, it's kind of personal preference, to be honest. And I mean, often they might just be doing one or the other.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm typically just on the underwater treadmill.
Yeah.
But I know athletes that are just doing the Alter G and ones that mix it up.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's kind of to each their own, and there's certainly benefits to both.
Yeah. And then on top of that, I guess you'd be doing some strength work and...
Yes. In a typical week, we usually lift a couple times as well, and those usually coincide with our workout days. It's all about making the hard days very hard, and the easier days, easy to an extent, yeah.
Do you run first and then do weights, or weights in the morning?
We run typically first, and then the weights are usually pretty close to after finishing. I mean, like often you'll go straight to it, but it's also kind of a little dependent on just the schedule, because just for each athlete.
Yeah. So when you're lifting, is the focus predominantly on legs, or is it kind of overall?
Yeah, it's predominantly on legs, I would say. A lot of single leg, kind of like balance intensive lifting. We don't spend a lot of time on both legs, honestly. I mean, just when we get to squats and deadlifts, but besides that, most of our stuff is with kettlebells, trying to balance while lifting. And not a lot of fun at first, but get a lot better at it pretty quickly.
Yeah, so high coordination stuff.
Correct, yeah. I mean, when you think about it, when you're running,
yeah,
you better not have both legs on the ground at the same time, or both feet on the ground at the same time.
Yeah.
Or you're doing something very wrong.
Any questions from the floor?
I just have one quick question. Last year, Cam, in your presentation, you talked about developing your sprint finish, and I think that's probably a trademark for so many of the athletes in the Oregon project. Farah, Galen, Rupp, and all of them having incredibly impressive kicks. At what point in the season do you develop work on the sprint finish? Is that?
I think today's workout will be sort of indicative of that we kind of are always doing a little bit of it throughout the season. And after besides just the actual workouts we're doing, like just doing shorter stuff throughout the whole season, we also are constantly doing sprints like after practice. I mean, we're doing 80s or 100s at least a few times, just on a consistent basis.
Even in a mileage phase?
Correct, yeah. And I mean, we don't go like straight into that after rest, or we don't go very hard into it straight away, but that continues to build. And I mean, typically by the time we actually start racing, it's going pretty well. It won't get too much faster. As far as like the 80s go, you know, obviously the workouts continue to get faster and faster.
Tom?
Towards working for like recovery, how much time do you spend on recovery, like after workouts or during the week? Is there like a certain time that you're like, I'm gonna do an hour of stretching? Like what is key for you guys?
Yeah, I mean every day I spend probably close to an hour of stretching. Yeah, I'd say probably. And then maybe another half an hour to hour of rolling, or I mean, obviously we get massage. I'd say, I mean, you kind of want to try and be a perfect athlete in as many ways as you can. And so, I mean, yeah, recovery is as important as anything else. And I mean, I don't know if you need to put necessarily a certain amount of time on it, but I have sort of a schedule that I follow for it, and it ends up being kind of the same amount of time each day. So I just try and keep following that same routine each day. I mean, I think, of course, stretching is probably one of the most important things for just like injury prevention. You know, a tight muscle is a muscle that's sort of in a bad place for potentially hurting it, I think, pulling it, ripping it, yeah. Yes?
Do you ever do any static stretching, or do you have to run first to do that?
Yeah, typically after running. I do a lot of static stretching though. I'm super inflexible, and I have to spend a lot of time to make any gains for flexibility, which is why I'm spending a good hour on it. But I think it has its place. I think dynamic stretching is really what you need to be doing before working out or racing though. I really don't believe too much in doing static stretching before racing unless something is feeling especially tight on you. And I think it's more dangerous not to do it. Yes?
Other questions?
Oh yeah, what happens if you weight lift too heavy?
We can't lift it, I guess. No.
Because someone like they don't want to lift too heavy.
Yeah.
Because they trying to like build like bulk muscle.
Yeah. No, I understand. There is a section of the season I think where it is good to try and build that strength and to lift heavy. We certainly do it. I mean, as a runner, you still need to be a good athlete, and so I mean, I think the trade-off for a little bit of extra strength, as long as your like nutrition is correct, I don't think you're really going to gain that much bulk from it. And the little bit that you do, when you start getting later into the season and perhaps switching a little bit, is in the same way that you start doing faster speed and perhaps a little bit less mileage that a lot of people do. I think the weightlifting kind of needs to mimic that. Instead of having that base phase for weightlifting, it needs to turn more into like power-based and a little bit less, moving the weight kind of faster. And so I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with getting a little bit of bulk at certain parts of the season, because that strength is so important. But there's a time for everything.
Any other questions?
So with your injury right now, not being able to run, are you still getting on the the underwater treadmill and stuff like that?
I'm hopeful I'll be able to get onto it soon. I haven't been able to do that yet either. It's mostly just because of this tendon has a lot of rehab to go. Everything I've sort of done so far has been non-weight bearing. I mean, and even though the underwater treadmill is very little weight bearing, it's still before I think you get that range of motion to move the foot how like in a sort of a normal gait, I think that kind of needs to be avoided. At least that's sort of what I've been instructed on so far. And so I've been swimming and aqua jogging to kind of still get that motion, and then also stationary biking quite a bit.
So just before we get into the nuts and bolts of what we're doing this morning, last night we were talking about, some of the race preparation from a mental perspective.
Okay.
So, I mean, you've raced at the very top levels in the sport. How do you approach a race from a psychological perspective or from a mental preparation perspective?
Well, if there's one thing I've learned so far is that overthinking is probably your biggest enemy when it comes to racing. I have learned that kind of the biggest thing is just remember that you're kind of like, this is supposed to be fun, and you're not supposed to be stressing too much about racing. And I think even just doing that is like huge. I think you're going to get your best race out of you, or out of yourself, if you kind of just relax a little bit. Because if you're focusing on that, I think the nervous energy of racing is going to sort of take care of the other side of that. I mean, you don't have to work on that part. I think getting too excited and too nervous about something is kind of where you run into problems. And as far as, I guess, how to do that, yeah, I think the big thing is just to, I remember talking about this a little bit last year. I'm just thinking. What we typically do is we focus on 3 things entering a race. And these 3 things can vary from individual to individual. But I think the big thing for it is just getting yourself to focus on something else and kind of like channeling that those nerves into something else. And so, I mean, yes, from one side of it, you can look at it like, hey, I'm here to have fun, I'm here to have a good time, that can relax you, and then totally, if you can't do that, the other side of it is to have a few different things to focus on going into a race. And I think those are sort of the best ways to approach it, yeah. And I mean, those 3 things can be anything, almost. For me, it's typically like focusing on trying to execute a kick, getting out well, and trying to be like tough through the middle of the race. Those are the 3 things I focus on. And I mean, that sort of covers the race for me, or the things that I feel are important, and sort of gets you more in the process of racing, and less so on other thoughts. So.
One final question I wanted to ask before we get into the workout stuff. I mean, you're training with Farah, Galen, Rupp, and Matt Centroids, and a bunch of other guys, right? These are like the top guys, right? These are fellows that have big egos, and so there's a dynamic that I'm sure that develops there with that group. How do you keep your head in the midst of all of that?
Well, I think the sort of the big thing that we do is when we're working out, I think we try and like really share the work. Everyone sort of has their own part of every workout, and so like while there's this ego involved, like everybody is contributing to this workout and working together. And I think there sort of develops a real like camaraderie to that. And a lot of the, having an ego, I think, is just, in some regards, what happens when. Like,
it's natural. It's not a negative thing. It's just a state of reality.
Correct. Yeah. And so, yeah. I mean, I think there's some different ways to deal with it. But in our group, it's just kind of like when you're getting to work out together and stuff, it's like, hey, it doesn't matter whether this person's this much faster than you at a particular workout. It's kind of like everyone has their part to do. And I think it really just kind of goes like, hey, ego's out the window here. Like,
Yeah.
we're all doing this together right now, and
Got a job to do.
yeah, precisely.
Excellent.
Does it ever get competitive?
Oh yeah, of course.
And what happens at the end if Mo's really, taking it to them and...
Mo's the worst, I'll tell you that much.
So does Alberto sort of pull the reins on and say...
Yeah, more so our assistant coach puts the reins on than Alberto. Alberto just I think continues to almost too much encourage it. He gets super excited about it.
Did you get the last rep blown up, that sort of thing?
Yeah, occasionally.
Yeah.
As I said, I think Mo is probably the worst for that. But yeah, it sort of depends who's all working out together at that time. But yeah, it happens fairly often. And usually someone in the group kind of gets pissed off about it afterwards. But like, why are we doing that kind of thing? But that's good too. I mean, you're training to compete, and you have a little bit of competition in practice. I think is beneficial in its way too.
So talk to us about what we're doing today.
Okay, so the workout today is 3 sets of 600, 400, 300, 200, and we're going to be doing it on a grass surface the whole time. You guys are in cross-country season, so I don't really feel like, at least I think most of you are in cross-country season, maybe some of you. Maybe that's a bit-
Most in this room would be ready.
Yeah. I think that's sort of, there's no real point being on the track right now. And rest is going to be 3 minutes, 2.5 minutes, 2 minutes, and then 2 minutes between sets. And the purpose behind this workout is, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you guys have been doing a lot of base stuff, and it's kind of like tapping into a little bit of faster work. And I think the sort of the big takeaway from it is that, I mean, if you guys want to do a Nike Working Project workout, this is kind of a staple. We've done this one a lot, and we do it all throughout the season, or like at all times of the year, in different ways. And it's one of the ones that really progresses from a slower side to a much faster side by the end of the season. And yeah, I mean, I'll discuss a little bit more as we get out there, but
So
I have certain thoughts for it.
Yeah, so it's interesting, the rest is quite long compared to what people would typically do, so why is the rest as long as it is?
It's, I think for us, a lot of our work that we do is based towards quality, kind of more than quantity. And so, I mean, honestly, every workout we do is probably like that sort of rest,
Yeah.
or more so. I mean, we rarely do anything less than that. And I would say we probably even take more rest than I'm giving you guys today. Yeah, honestly. Ours is usually distance-based, more so than actually even time-based in between. And so, yeah, I think it's really important to I mean, I feel that way too. I think it's really important to really focus on totally burned out and not really being able to kind of tap into that faster work that hopefully you're getting to the end of the workout.
So what kind of, talking about quality, what kind of pace should they be hitting out for to do this workout at?
Well, typically the 600s start at about 5K pace, and we'll probably maybe have to convert that for some people here, but 5K, and then it'll be dropping down a couple seconds each repeat as we go 6, 4, 3, 2, and then throughout the entire workout, I want the average we're looking for to be kind of starting on the slower side of that and ending on the faster side of that. So you're continuing to build through the workout. I know a lot of people have the tendency to go out too fast at the beginning of workouts. I've done it. I'm sure everybody's done it. But I mean, at the beginning of a race, or just a race in general, that's kind of not what you want to do. I mean, you don't want to go out fast and just burn up by the end of it. This is really a good thing for sort of practicing how you want to race. And just in general, I think it's kind of harder to do your faster stuff by the end of the workout, and we want to make it hard.
So we're gonna jog over there to the park, and then you're gonna take us through some warm-up stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So we've got Chris is gonna be our guinea pig here, and is gonna because Cam can't really demo stuff with his foot. So Chris is our capable assistant, and he's gonna do the demo stuff, and then we'll get into this. Now, how many sets are we doing today?
I'm hopeful that we'll be doing 3. For some, maybe 2, depending on how you guys are feeling. But ideally, I'm looking at 3 sets here.
Okay, and so you're supposed to be building, so your last set is the faster 3 sets.
Yes, so whatever average we work out to be, I want you guys to be going slower at the first set, hopefully on pace for the second, and then ideally faster for the last one. Put off the reins a little bit. Yeah.
Okay.